Konami has returned. Well, not really. They never went anywhere. They've been releasing games the whole time, but they're back to making games we care about. Silent Hill 2, Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, Suikoden, and Suikoden 2. So, they aren't back to making games we care about, they're bringing back games we already care about. Silent Hill 2 Remake was phenomenal. Metal Gear Solid Delta and the Suikoden remasters look phenomenal. Even the most cynical of us can see the quality of these games' revival. There's no problem here. Yet. The problem they may face is that they aren't making anything we care about that's new. These games are built on the back of the original teams that brought them to life. Every hand that turned the gears of creation, every light bulb moment during development, every ounce of doubt that crept in, is the blood, sweat, and tears that created the games we care about. Konami has every right to remake, remaster, and collect until the end of time, and they should. There will always be new players who have yet to experience the joy of these games. They should always be available and in their best form. Many of the creators that built Konami's reputation with these games have long since left Konami and have started their own independent ventures. These are Konami's exes, the creator of Metal Gear, Hideo Kojima, the creator of Silent Hill, Keiichiro Toyama, the man who put the Vania in Metroidvania, Koji Igarashi, and the creator of Suikoden, the late Yoshitaka Murayama. While they left Konami, the games they created were left behind. So the question is, who will ultimately win? Konami, the owner of the games and IP that we love, or the creators that made them? First up, Metal Gear vs. Death Stranding. After releasing Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain in 2015 to critical and commercial success, Kojima left Konami due to, let's say, relationship issues. Founded Kojima Productions that very same year, getting in bed with PlayStation, and began work on a new IP. The Metal Gear franchise would get another entry just 2.5 years later without Kojima's involvement. Metal Gear Survive, a survival game that had you resource gathering, base building, and tower defending. Putting it lightly, it wasn't great. A far cry from the usual excellence found in the series, and our first sign that while Konami had kept the face of Metal Gear, it seemed that Kojima had walked out the door with its heart and soul. The following year in 2019, Kojima would release Death Stranding, a cinematic, emotionally dense, beautifully scored, visually stunning walking simulator. A far from flawless first outing, with a positive leaning but mixed response. The gameplay departure from Metal Gear was a tough pill for many to swallow. If not for Kojima's name being all over this project, it never gets greenlit, at least not at this scale or budget. That's a position Kojima earned himself throughout the years delivering with Metal Gear. In the years since its release, it does feel like appreciation for what Death Stranding accomplished has grown, especially in an industry that gets so few chances to try something new in the creatively stagnating AAA space. Either way, enough success was found with the game selling 5 million units by 2021, and a sequel is on the way in 2025. Also on the way in 2025 is Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, a remake of MGS3 developed internally by Konami with support from Virtuos. It looks really good. Like Resident Evil 4 good. The development team has already said they are being faithful to the original game and aren't reimagining Snake Eater. Instead, they are just bringing it forward for that ever so important modern audience, meaning it will look better and play smoother. So Capcom isn't the best comparison point. Bluepoint with Shadow of the Colossus and Demon Souls sounds like the more apt comparison. I struggle to imagine them fucking this up. Stick to the script, so to speak, and you'll be fine. This is how Konami can reinvigorate the decade-long dormant Metal Gear fandom. It all starts here, both chronologically for Metal Gear and expectations for Konami's new Metal Gear era without Kojima. The most important entity to learn from here isn't Kojima or Konami, it's Sony. Sony could have gone to Konami in 2015 and invested in Metal Gear's future without Kojima's involvement. Instead, they went to Kojima and invested in him. They are working with him to create the Death Stranding franchise and a new action espionage game, Fizzant. They believed the true value was the people behind the games, not the games themselves. Next up, Castlevania vs. Bloodstained. Koji Igarashi, did not create Castlevania, but he was instrumental in the franchise's most highly regarded game, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. First, a scenario writer and programmer on the game, halfway through development was promoted to assistant director tasked to bring the game to the finish line. Symphony of the Night, along with the Metroid series, went on to inspire the Metroidvania genre as we see it today. Igarashi went on to oversee many, but not all, Castlevania projects before the series whimpered out in 2014. That same year, he left Konami due to, let's say, relationship issues and became a founding member of the gaming company Artplay. After successful funding on Kickstarter, Igarashi released Bloodstained Ritual of the Night in 2019. Unlike Kojima with Death Stranding, this was exactly what his fans wanted. A spiritual successor to Castlevania, specifically Symphony of the Night style of Castlevania. Though the game was conventional, taking much from his past titles, the crowdfunding nature of this game showed just how much demand there was still for Castlevania-like games and for Igarashi himself. In a time of crowdfunding mishaps, the likes of Mighty No. 9,
and make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
Bloodstained was a shining example of what could be accomplished by Japanese game makers that took the chance on themselves. Ritual of the Night went on to sell 2 million units by September 2023. One of the crowdfunding goals during the initial campaign was the promise of a retro-style companion game, which turned out to be Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, released in 2018 ahead of even the main game, followed by its sequel, Curse of the Moon 2, in 2020, both developed by Inti Creates. That's 3 projects in 3 years for Igarashi's spiritual successor franchise, Bloodstained. All the while, the spirit of Castlevania looks to have been exorcised ever since he left. At least, that's true for new games. Konami, as previously established, isn't making games we care about, they're bringing them back to life. That's no more true than for Castlevania, who has seen 4 collections released from 2018 to 2024, the first being Castlevania Requiem, bringing together Igarashi's famous Symphony of the Night with the game his once girlfriend, now wife, worked on, Rondo of Blood. What follows is a compilation of classic Castlevanias in the Anniversary Collection, a trio of Game Boy Advance games in the Advanced Collection, and the Nintendo DS's own triple threat with the Dominus Collection. Konami has got a couple more collections they can throw at us before they empty the well, but after that, there'll be time for some new ideas, or remakes if you want to be a bit more cynical. Konami spent 6 years giving us what we already had, albeit making them all more available on modern platforms we can play on. We can't ignore that, but surely something new could have been made too. Igarashi spent 6 years building a company, independently fundraising, and delivering 3 new games. We can't ignore that either. Next, Suikoden vs. Eiyuden Chronicle. This one is hard to talk about. My objectivity has wavered. Creator of Suikoden and Eiyuden Chronicle is no longer with us. Yoshitaka Murayama passed away during the development of Eiyuden Chronicle just 3 months before its release. Murayama was responsible for directing the first 3 Suikoden games, although he wasn't credited for the third because he left just before the release in July 2002. Murayama left Konami because he had a limit for himself, to work no longer than 10 years at Konami, knowing he needed to go independent. While some needed to find the courage or inspiration to go independent, Murayama had that mindset from the beginning. I don't have all the background information on the late 90s, early 2000s Japanese games industry, but I suspect that Murayama was one of the few of his generation that had that mindset that early. Of the names we mentioned today, he was the quickest to believe in himself and venture out on his own. Murayama would go on to found Blue Moon Studio, and in 2005 make the game 10,000 Bullets, a third-person shooter about a hitman named Crow with a bullet time ability, similar to Max Payne. Murayama wanted to make a shooter even before his work on Suikoden. After successfully delivering 3 beloved JRPGs, he did just that under his own label. The game was met with poor sales and mediocre reviews from critics, but Murayama had made the game he wanted on his own terms. 10,000 Bullets is the only game Blue Moon Studio would ever release. Fast forward to 2020, Murayama announces a Kickstarter for Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes, poised as a spiritual successor to Suikoden, which hadn't had a mainline release since Suikoden 5 in 2006. The Kickstarter for Eiyuden reached its goal in 3 hours and broke through all of its stretch goals. One of those stretch goals was the promise of what would eventually become Eiyuden Chronicle Rising, an action RPG set before the main game. The companion game was met with a mixed response. Some then became worried about the main game's quality, while others stayed optimistic. Rising was developed by Natsume Atari with help from Murayama's new studio, Rabbit and Bear. Just last year in 2024, Rabbit and Bear released Eiyuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. While the reception to the main game was definitely still mixed, there was more positivity about this entry than for Rising. The traditional structure of the game left some wanting more, but many appreciated the familiar comfort of common Suikoden trappings. It, at the very least, was an admirable first game for a new studio and an exciting start to what could develop into a compelling series down the line. Murayama is no longer around to receive the love he deserves for keeping the fire of the Suikoden fanbase alive, and doing so with true heart and passion. We can only hope the team he assembled at Rabbit and Bear Studios keep that passion going and deliver fans another chapter of the Eiyuden Chronicle. Until that next game comes, Murayama's legacy still lives on in the Suikoden series. His first two games are coming back in 2025 with the release of Suikoden 1 and 2 HD Remaster, Gate Room, and Dunan Unification Wars. Konami is finding an interesting middle ground to bring these classics back. They aren't as remade as, say, Dragon Quest III HD 2D, or as marginally upgraded as Konami's usual collections. These seem to be more upgrades worthy of the name remaster, with HD backgrounds, new effects like lighting, and various quality of life changes. If Konami is hoping to revive the Suikoden franchise, I think this is a good first step in doing so. Suikoden 1 and 2 are highly regarded as some of the best the genre has to offer, and sprucing them up will be much appreciated by fans and new players alike. There's still 3 more to go before we can start expecting anything new, so Suikoden is in more of a wait-and-see state than some of the other larger investments Konami is making. I don't think there is a AAA Suikoden game in development right now, and that's probably the right call. For a franchise that has been dormant for so long, it makes sense to start building up an army of fans that could fill a castle. Suikoden 4 and 5 were made without Murayama, but they were also much less beloved. If Konami hopes to court fans back to the franchise, it would take a team of people who love Suikoden, a team like Rabbit and Bear. They, however, may be busy continuing Murayama's legacy in their own way, with Eiyuden. Next, Silent Hill vs. Slitterhead. There's a non-zero chance you have no idea what Slitterhead is. The man behind Slitterhead is the same man behind the first Silent Hill, Keiichiro Toyama. Toyama left Konami back in 1999 after launching Silent Hill to critical and commercial success. Toyama said he left Konami because he felt he became director too quickly. Having only worked on 2 games prior as a graphic and character designer, he left Konami to go establish himself at Japan Studio, a Sony team, where he again quickly became a director on the Siren and Gravity Rush series. Eventually, he left Japan Studio in 2020, a decision inspired by a fellow Japan Studio alum venturing out on his own, the director of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, Fumito Ueda. Toyama founded Bokeh Game Studio in 2020 and began work on his first independent game, Slitterhead. After a decade-and-a-half break from horror, Toyama returned to the genre in November 2024. Slitterhead, an action horror game with a cool premise of body swapping and blood manipulation combat, leads to an overall negative critical reception, but a very positive reception on Steam, with some still finding plenty of ambition and execution to praise. It reads like a game that those who give it a chance with lower expectations will find a lot to love and evangelize, but the general public will chalk it up as an easy pass. Given the insane release output of the industry, the high level of quality found in so many titles, and the lack of time we all have to play, it's not hard to understand why some would turn the other way. I think I'll find some time for it this year and see what all the fuss is about. One of those high-quality games in the same genre, horror, released just a month earlier, the sequel to the franchise Toyama started, Silent Hill 2. Developed by Bloober Team, known for middling games like Medium, Layers of Fear, and Blair Witch, suffice to say expectations were low for the Silent Hill 2 remake. Deservedly so. Bloober ended up not just exceeding expectations, but blew them away to an almost unrecognizable degree. The blueprint was there, of course, but even what was originally added by Bloober was praised for a deep understanding of the original game. The game solidified the feeling that Konami was back. Yes, it was a remake, but the execution was on a level not believed to be possible by Konami. If Metal Gear Survive in 2018 was a sign that Konami had no idea what it was doing, Silent Hill 2 Remake is a sign that in the 6 years in between, they may have figured it out. Instead of wearing the face of a franchise you clearly don't understand, find the global talent that does, and get them to make the games we care about. I would feel unapologetically optimistic about Konami understanding that strategy if Silent Hill 2 Remake was the only Silent Hill game to come out in 2024. In reality, Konami released an internally developed game called Silent Hill: The Short Message for free in January 2024. It was really bad, and the only hope is that after Bloober Team's success, they now understand who needs to be handling these IPs. I would feel hopeful about that if they didn't have Silent Hill F already on the way, a new mainline Silent Hill game being developed by NeoBards Entertainment, historically a co-developer working with the likes of Capcom to remaster and collect various franchises like Dead Rising or Devil May Cry. They are now seemingly helming Silent Hill F. I know we just went through the same fears of Bloober handling Silent Hill 2. This is a new game made by what has been a support studio. No offense. There's just, again, not a lot to be confident in, but hey, here's hoping for the best. I'm also not confident in Slitterhead's financial success being able to keep Bokeh Game Studio afloat. The game peaked at around 750 players on Steam. While the cult classic label is almost certainly in Slitterhead's future, the future of Toyama's studio is uncertain. A remake of the first Silent Hill, Toyama's game, is undoubtedly on the way from Konami. Its creator may not be involved, but a team of those inspired by Toyama will be able to deliver a modern reinterpretation of a bona fide classic. Konami can get back at its exes by finding teams that have reverence for the respective IPs and create something new that's great. Rehashing the past is smart business, but it still shows us that they can't move on from what their exes made. The creators of these IPs will still feel vindicated if Konami relies on the work they did. They may not want their games remade or remastered until the end of time, but they will still find pleasure in their old classics still hitting just as hard decades later. Meanwhile, they too struggle with getting out from under the shadow of their past works, hoping that they didn't peak in high school and that the best is still ahead of them. Konami and its exes have a lot to prove and will no doubt fight over us, the gamers. In the end, we will get all the attention and hopefully great games. Thanks for watching and/or listening.